Our big family getaway had barely started when my mom suddenly decided my bank account belonged to everyone. She ripped my purse out of my hands, dug out my wallet, and happily declared that my card would be covering the entire trip. I just smiled and quietly lined up a move so savage it turned their free vacation into the biggest regret of their lives. You know that moment when someone crosses a line so brazenly, so shamelessly, that your blood just runs cold? For me, it happened on what was supposed to be a family vacation, and it kicked off a war I didn't know I was about to win. Our family trip had barely begun when my mother, Eleanor, decided she was in charge of my finances. With a triumphant, almost predatory grin, she yanked my purse right out of my hands. "We'll be using your credit card for this vacation," she announced, her eyes gleaming. I kept my expression carefully neutral, but inside, oh, I was already savoring what was about to happen. I just smiled, pulled out my phone, tapped open my banking app, and slowly turned the screen toward her. "Then you're going to love this message from the bank." Her confident smile vanished instantly. Her face, which moments ago was alight with smug satisfaction, paled. Her eyes darted across the screen, then back to mine, and then she screamed. That was the exact moment I knew this trip was about to spiral into glorious, delicious chaos. Eleanor stood frozen right there in the middle of the airport terminal, still gripping my purse like she'd just struck gold. But that smug expression, the one she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand, it was gone. In an instant. She really thought she'd won, that I would just quietly go along with it. But I had other plans. Let me rewind a bit so you understand just how deep this all goes. Growing up, saying no to Eleanor was never an option. Every single time I tried to set a boundary, I was guilt-tripped, manipulated, bombarded with calls, treated like the selfish daughter who just didn't care about her family. So, I knew exactly how it would play out if I flat-out refused to fund this trip. Instead of saying no, I agreed, but on my terms. I booked my own flight. I reserved my own hotel room. No shared accommodations, no way for them to access my money. I was going, yes, but I was making damn sure they couldn't take advantage of me. Eleanor hated that. She sulked, she complained, she threw tantrums. But eventually, she seemed to let it go. Or so I thought. Fast forward back to the airport. We had just landed, and honestly, I was already mentally drained. I'd spent the entire flight mentally bracing myself for whatever stunt Eleanor was about to pull. And sure enough, the moment we reached baggage claim, she made her move. Without a shred of hesitation, she snatched my purse. "We'll be using your credit card for this trip," she declared, absolutely brimming with confidence. I didn't even blink. Instead, I just smiled, pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and turned the screen towards her. She read the message. Then she reread it. And then she screamed. See, I had been preparing for this for a long, long time. I learned ages ago that Eleanor would go to truly great lengths to get what she wanted, but this time, I was ready. A week before the trip, I called my bank. I explained everything. The financial control, the manipulation, the countless attempts to gain access to my money. The bank representative was incredibly understanding, but more importantly, they were helpful. Together, we set up some serious security measures. My card was locked to my location. That meant any transactions outside of my immediate area would be flagged and automatically declined unless I manually approved them through my app. And as an extra layer of pure, petty protection, I set my daily spending limit to exactly $1. Eleanor's grip tightened around my purse, her knuckles turning bone white. "What did you do?" she hissed, her voice laced with pure venom. I just shrugged, feigning innocence. "Bank security." They thought it was suspicious that large transactions were suddenly coming from a place I hadn't even arrived at yet. Her expression twisted with unadulterated fury. "Fix it. Now." My mother, Eleanor, had never been one to accept defeat. She was already scheming her next move. I could see it in her eyes. I checked into my hotel feeling utterly victorious. My room was on a completely different floor from my parents, Eleanor, and Robert, a strategic decision. I needed space. A barrier. But the very next morning, the real nightmare began. I woke up to pounding at my door. Not knocking. Pounding. As if someone was trying to break it down. Groaning, I rolled out of bed and checked the peephole. Eleanor. And she was absolutely furious. Before I could even think, she started yelling through the door, "Alex, open this door right now. We need to talk." I sighed, debating whether to just pretend I wasn't there. But I knew her. If I ignored her, she would only escalate. So I cracked the door open an inch, leaving the security chain firmly in place. "What?" I asked, my voice flat. She shoved a crumpled piece of paper through the gap. "The front desk says our card was declined. We can't check into our room." "Fix it." I just stared at her. "You didn't prepay?" She scoffed. "Why would we? We were planning to use your card, obviously." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to laugh until I cried. Instead, I just handed the paper back. "Sounds like a you problem." She slammed her fist against the door frame. "You think this is funny? Where are we supposed to sleep?" I shrugged. "Maybe you should have brought your own money." That's when she really lost it. Screaming, throwing accusations, saying I had abandoned my family, humiliated her, ruined the trip. And then a thought struck me. Robert. My father. He was just as guilty. He never stopped her. Never defended me. Never once told her she was wrong. I shook my head. Not my problem. And then I shut the door in her face. But she wasn't done. Oh no. An hour later, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Calls, texts, voicemails. I ignored them all. Then, there was a knock on my door. A polite one this time. I checked the peephole. Not Eleanor. Not Robert. Hotel security. I sighed, already knowing where this was going. I opened the door. "What's the issue?" The security officer gave me a tight smile. "Your parents are at the front desk. They're claiming you stole their money and left them stranded." I laughed. A real, full-bellied laugh. "You've got to be kidding me." The security guard didn't laugh back. "They're insisting that you let them stay in your room." "Oh, absolutely not," I said, crossing my arms. "Do they have any proof that I took anything from them?" He hesitated. "Well, no." I cut him off. "Then they're lying. I booked my own room. I paid for it with my own money. They tried to take advantage of me, and now they're dealing with the consequences. Not my problem." The guard shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I'm not trying to take sides, but they're saying they have nowhere else to go. The hotel is fully booked." I raised an eyebrow. "Still not my problem." Another voice spoke up from behind him. "She's right." I leaned past security and saw the hotel manager standing there, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and the exhausted expression of someone who had dealt with far too many entitled guests. She turned to me. "I checked the system. You paid in full. Your parents, however, did not. If they can't provide another payment method, they'll have to leave." From down the hall, Eleanor's voice shrieked. And, just like that, they were gone. But of course, she wasn't done. That night, I headed down to the resort bar to grab a drink, finally starting to relax. Just as I was unwinding, my phone buzzed. A notification from my bank, attempted login from an unrecognized device. My stomach dropped. I sat up straight. Then another alert, password reset requested. My blood ran cold. I knew exactly what was happening. I sprinted back to my room, locked the door behind me, and immediately opened my banking app. Sure enough, someone, I wonder who, had just tried to reset my password. I acted fast. New password. Two-factor authentication. Security alerts cranked up to the highest possible level. Then I did something I should have done a long time ago. I called my bank and put a full fraud alert on my account. And then I sent Eleanor a text, "Nice try. Hope you enjoy the rest of your trip." No response. But the next morning, my dad, Robert, called. "Eleanor says you locked her out of the bank." I smiled. "No, I locked me out of the bank. She just happened to be trying to break in at the time." Silence. Then a sigh. "You know how she is." "Yeah," I said, my voice firm. "And I'm done with it." And that's when I made my final move. Trust me, Eleanor didn't take it well. I had spent my entire life playing defense, letting Eleanor get away with things. She would lie, manipulate, even steal, always justifying it by saying she was my mother and family takes care of each other. But this? Trying to break into my bank account? That was a new low. I remained silent, holding the phone, trying to process what my brother, Ben, had just told me. Eleanor had done the exact same thing to him. She wasn't satisfied with just stealing from me. She had gone after him too. A potent mix of anger and disgust spread through my chest. I was already furious about what she'd tried to do to me, but now it was different. Ben was her favorite, the golden child, the one who had never heard a no from Eleanor, the one who always had everything I didn't. If she was willing to step over him, then she truly had no limits. How much did she take? My voice came out colder than I expected. On the other end of the line, Ben took a deep breath. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out. But it wasn't a small amount. She was taking little amounts over months, but when I added everything up. He hesitated. How much? I pressed. It's over 1,000. Maybe more. I closed my eyes, my stomach churning. I knew she was manipulative, that she thrived on emotional schemes, that she always wanted to come out on top. But this was theft. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. I could go to the police. I could report her for fraud and theft. I could finally make her face the consequences of her actions. And a huge part of me really wanted to. Listen, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We can't just let this go. She stole from us, and this wasn't a one-time thing. She's been doing it for months. We can report her. I have proof. Bank statements, suspicious transactions, everything. You do too. We can take her down for good. There was a long silence on the other end. Maybe, Ben murmured. Maybe what? I asked, my patience wearing thin. He sighed. Maybe there's a better way to handle this. Something that doesn't involve the police, but ends up being much worse for her. That caught me off guard. Worse how? Meet me, he said. I hesitated for a moment, but I needed to know what he was thinking. Where are you? He sent me the location of his hotel, and without a second thought, I grabbed my bag, my phone, and left. The drive there was a whirlwind of thoughts, my anger mixed with a strange urgency. The image of Eleanor trying to break into my bank account was still fresh. The worst part? She probably wasn't even remorseful. To her, we were just resources to be exploited. When I arrived at Ben's hotel, he was already waiting in the lobby. His face was tense, his eyes slightly bloodshot. And the first thing I noticed was that he didn't just look angry, he looked betrayed. We sat in a quiet corner of the reception area, and he wasted no time. She thinks she can do this and get away with it, his voice a sharp whisper. She spent all the trip money, tried to steal from you, and you know what I just found out? I just stared at him, waiting. She already took out a loan in my name. My heart skipped a beat. What? What do you mean? I found it in my online banking. A freaking loan under my name. She must have used some contact at a bank to pull it off. I never got a notification or anything, but it's there. By now, my skin was tingling with pure outrage. That's a scam. Ben let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, and what happens to scammers? The question lingered in the air for a few seconds. We report them, I said. Or we do something worse. I raised an eyebrow. Worse how? He leaned forward, his voice low and serious. She wants to steal from us? Then what if we do the opposite? You want to steal from her? I asked, suspicious. Not steal, but take something back. Something that will really hurt. I said nothing, just waited. She's used to taking advantage of everyone, but this time, we play her game. How? He took a deep breath and glanced around, as if making sure no one was listening. What if we get her to put a house in my name? I blinked, confused. What? Think about it, he said. She's going to need money. A lot of money. She's going to panic when she realizes she can't steal from us anymore. She'll be desperate for a quick fix. If we give her the right idea, she might end up doing it willingly. My brain started working fast. I understood what he was getting at. Eleanor was the type to spiral fast when she felt cornered. She acted impulsively and always made terrible decisions when she was scared of losing control. If we made it seem like her only way out was transferring a property into his name, She might fall for it. I took a deep breath. And how do we make that happen? He smiled. A cold, calculating smile. We need to create a problem bigger than hers. One that makes her think there's only one solution. And that solution is us. A chill ran down my spine. I knew Ben. He had never been manipulated the way I had. He had always been given everything, always been protected. But now that he had been betrayed, he wasn't going to let it slide. I stared at him for a long moment. You think you can pull this off? Make her believe it. He didn't hesitate. She loves me, right? I'm the favorite. He paused, then looked me straight in the eye. She'd trust me before she'd trust anyone else. The plan was risky, but there was something deliciously cruel about it. Eleanor wanted to use us as her personal bank. Now, we were going to do the exact opposite. I took a deep breath, letting the plan take shape in my mind. Then let's do this. He smirked. I already have a few ideas. I leaned in closer. Tell me. And just like that, the real revenge began. I sat back in the hotel chair, crossing my arms as I studied Ben. He looked calm, but I could see it in his eyes. He was just as furious as I was, maybe even more so. How do we do this? I asked. He smirked, that kind of grin he always had when he was planning something no one expected from him. She's desperate, right? She thinks she has no way out, no money, no way to recover. But we give her a solution. I narrowed my eyes. What kind of solution? He leaned in, lowering his voice. What if she borrowed money from a loan shark? I blinked a few times, not immediately processing what he meant. What? Think about it, he continued. If she truly believes the only way out is getting cash fast, she's going to start looking for options. She can't use our cards, the bank is watching her. But what if we suggest a way? A high-interest loan. Something she can pay back later. I took a deep breath, letting the idea settle in my mind. It made sense. Eleanor was always impulsive. If something looked like a quick fix, she'd take it without thinking about the consequences. We give her a little push. Tell her we know someone. Make it seem like it's her only option. Exactly, Ben's grin sharpened. And then we take the money and disappear with it, he said. I raised an eyebrow. We take the money, and how the hell does that not come back to bite us? He shrugged. She can't go to the police, right? She can't report a crime she committed. And with a loan shark? Well, that becomes her problem. I didn't respond right away. It was risky, but there was something deeply satisfying about making her taste her own medicine. She had stolen from us for years, manipulated us, treated us like walking ATMs. Now, she was about to find out what it felt like to be used. I exhaled. All right. How do we make this happen? Ben already had everything planned out. We found a contact through one of his acquaintances, a guy who lent money at absurd interest rates, no questions asked, no paperwork. The kind of person Eleanor would normally avoid if she were thinking clearly. But she wasn't thinking clearly. She was cornered, out of options, desperate to regain control. All we had to do was nudge her in the right direction. The next day, I went to where Eleanor and Robert were staying. Eleanor opened the door with a bitter expression, still resentful over everything that had happened. What do you want? She asked, suspicious. I crossed my arms and sighed. Look, we need to talk. I know things got messy, but I think I found a way to help you. Her eyes lit up for a brief moment before she quickly masked it. Oh, really? You finally realized you need to support your family. I had to bite back a smirk of pure disdain. She actually thought I had come back regretful. I just want to stop this from getting worse. If you can get a good amount of money now, you can turn things around. But banks won't lend you anything, so I know someone who can. She stayed quiet, analyzing my words. What kind of someone? Someone who lends money fast, no paperwork. But the interest is high, so you need to be sure you can pay it back later. She hesitated, biting her lip. I knew she was weighing the risks, but I also knew that in her mind, having money now was far more important than whatever consequences came later. How much? She finally asked. I exchanged a glance with Ben, who pretended to be reluctant. Depends on what you need, but I think 20 grand would help a lot, right? She sucked in a breath. 20,000. It was a lot of money, but to her, it was the perfect solution. And you think you would really lend me that much if I vouch for you? Yes, I said. That was all she needed to hear. 2 days later, she showed up with the money. $20,000 in an envelope, real bills, dirty and smelling of pure desperation. She handed the envelope to me with a smug expression. Here it is. But this is a loan. You're paying me back with the agreed interest. Understood. I smiled, gripping the envelope. Of course. Then I walked away, holding back laughter. That same night, I sat next to Ben, who already had his laptop open. He took the envelope, pulled out the 20,000, and without hesitation, converted every single cent to Bitcoin. Done, he said. I blinked. Done? That's it. He shrugged. Now we wait. And if she asks about the money? He smirked. We act like nothing happened. I burst into laughter. I couldn't help it. Everything was happening so fast, and it was so absurd that I didn't even know if I should feel guilty or satisfied. Eleanor thought she had us wrapped around her finger, that she had trapped us in a debt that would keep us tied to her forever. But now she was the one trapped. She owed $20,000 to a dangerous loan shark, and she had no money left. And us? We had just turned her scam into our investment. 2 days later, Eleanor called me. I want my money. I feigned surprise. What money? The money I lent you. I laughed internally, but kept my voice calm. Oh, you wanted it back now? I thought you said it was long-term. She huffed. The interest is stacking up. I need that money now. I rolled my eyes. Relax, everything's under control. You borrowed from a loan shark. If I don't pay, you know what could happen. I smiled. Wow, that really sounds like your problem. And I hung up. I knew this wasn't over. Eleanor would still try to turn the situation around. But now she was on the defensive. For the first time in her life, she knew what it felt like to be on the wrong side of the scam. The feeling of victory didn't come immediately. At first, it all felt like a dangerous game, too risky to celebrate too soon. Eleanor had always been unpredictable, always found a way to slip out of consequences. But this time, there was no escape. This time, the problem she created was too big, even for her. And Ben and I? We just waited. Our strategy was simple. We acted as if nothing had happened. Ben and I went on with our lives as usual, giving no indication that we knew the situation she and Robert had gotten themselves into. We never asked about the money. We never brought it up. Eleanor, on the other hand, panicked. Fast. At first, it was just a series of persistent messages. Then came the phone calls. Then the unannounced visits. At first, she tried to maintain her usual authoritative tone, as if she was still in control. "Where's my money?" she would demand, wearing that same superior expression that no longer had any effect on me. And I would always reply in the same neutral tone, "What money?" The outburst started after the first week. "Don't play games with me, Alex. You know exactly what I'm talking about." I would just smile, unfazed. "I have no idea what you mean." She would slam doors, call Robert to try and pressure me, but nothing worked. Ben and I stood firm, unshaken. And deep down, she knew she was trapped. She couldn't report it. She couldn't take it to court. The money had left her hands willingly. And the worst part? The loan shark wanted his payment. It didn't take long for the first signs of real desperation to appear. At first, she tried negotiating with him, asking for more time, swearing the money was on its way. But those kinds of people don't accept excuses. The first time she came to me in tears, I knew things were going exactly how I wanted. "Alex, if you have a heart, help me fix this. They're going to kill us." I rolled my eyes. "You're the one who took the money, remember? You manipulated me." And there it was, the first attempt to pin the blame on me. "I didn't do anything. It was your choice. You and your brother set me up." "Well, maybe you should have been smarter then," I said. She fell silent, just staring at me with a mix of hatred and fear. I had never spoken to her like that before, and in that moment, she realized that I truly didn't care anymore. When they started selling furniture, I knew things were getting serious. Robert said nothing, just avoided eye contact whenever we crossed paths. Ben and I watched from a distance, never interfering. This wasn't our problem. They tried selling the car, but the money wasn't enough. They started selling things inside the house, still not enough. In the end, they had no choice. The house was put up for sale. And that was the exact moment I knew the game was over. They had lost. Eleanor, always so proud, always so used to controlling everyone and everything, was now signing away the house she had lived in for years. All because she tried to pull a scam and failed. And Ben and I? We kept pretending nothing was happening. I remember the last thing Eleanor said to me before they moved into a tiny apartment. She gave me a look filled with pure contempt. "You destroyed our family." I did. I smiled, genuinely amused by the accusation. "No, you did that all by yourself." She just stared at me, speechless. Deep down, she knew it was true, but she would never admit it. After that, they never messed with us again. No requests for money. No emotional blackmail. No attempts to manipulate us. Ever again. Nothing. Robert never looked at us the same way again either. He never said a word, but deep down, he knew this only happened because he never had the courage to stand up to her. And Eleanor? Oh, she never forgave us. Not because we ruined their lives, but because she truly believed I had manipulated Ben. She was convinced he would never have done something like this on his own, that he was always the perfect son, the golden child. But the truth? He was the one who planned almost everything. And that was the greatest irony of all. I never felt guilty. Not for a single second. In the end, we got exactly what we wanted, freedom from them. And it was glorious. The money took some time to grow. Ben had always been more patient than me when it came to investments, and he knew exactly how to wait for the right moment to act. At first, I didn't really care about what would happen to that money. What truly mattered was that we had won. But one day, months after everything had collapsed for our parents, Ben called me. "We need to go out and celebrate." I raised an eyebrow. "Celebrate what?" He grinned and opened an app on his phone, turning the screen toward me. The amount had doubled. I stared at the numbers, speechless. "No way." He shrugged. "We made the right move at the right time. And now that it's gone up, I figured it was only fair to give you your share." That's when it hit me. He didn't have to give me anything. It was his money, after all. He had come up with the plan. He had made everything happen. And yet here he was, thanking me as if I had done half the work. "You don't have to, seriously. This was all you. I just went along with it." He laughed. "That's ridiculous. Without you, I never would have done any of this. You were always there for me, even when I was Eleanor's favorite, even when she treated you like garbage and I pretended not to see it. You opened my eyes. And if anyone deserves this money, it's you." He put his phone away and handed me an envelope. Inside, there was way more money than I expected. This is just the beginning. If we wait a little longer, it could triple. I blinked a few times, unsure of what to say. For the first time in my life, he was thanking me for something. He was never the kind of person to express his feelings easily. He had always been the spoiled son, the favorite, the one who never had to worry about anything. But now, in this moment, he was acknowledging everything I had been through, everything Eleanor had put me through. And knowing that, that was the best part of the revenge. These days, my life is peaceful. I never had to look back and, honestly, there's nothing in my past that I'd want to revisit. With the money Ben gave me, I was able to completely rebuild my life. I moved to a new city, bought a small apartment, my apartment. I never had to depend on anyone again. I never had to worry about Eleanor and Robert's shadow creeping back into my life. And Ben? He's better than ever. He cut all remaining ties with our parents and decided to live life on his own terms. He invested even more money, and now he has the kind of life Eleanor always wanted for herself. The difference is, he built it on his own. Sometimes he texts me, laughing at the irony of it all. If she knew I'm making money off what she tried to steal from us, I think she'd have a heart attack. And honestly, I think he's right. As for our parents? Oh, they're exactly where they were always meant to be. After selling the house to pay off the loan shark, they had to move into a small, run-down apartment. Eleanor, who once bragged about having the perfect family, now lives off scraps in a place she would have despised at the peak of her arrogance. And Robert? Well, he never said anything. Even when everything fell apart, He never came to us, never made a last-ditch effort, never apologized. He just accepted his new reality and kept living in Eleanor's shadow, just like he always had. They never tried to contact us again. And to me, that's a gift. Because now they know they can never use us again. Now they know they have no control over us. Now we are free. And honestly, that's worth more than any amount of money. Growing up with parents like Eleanor and Robert taught me many things, but perhaps the most important lesson was this. You can have parents, but that doesn't mean they have the right to control your life. I learned that the hard way. My parents believed that because they raised me, they automatically had access to whatever was mine, my time, my patience, my money, especially my money. They never saw their children as individuals. To them, we were extensions of themselves, resources meant to fulfill their needs without question. And for a long time, I accepted that. I accepted it because as a child, it was easy to believe my parents were right, that family is family, that it's just alone, that they would do the same for me. Lies. They would never do the same for me. What my parents wanted wasn't a loving bond of family. They wanted a long-term investment. They raised children expecting us to be living savings accounts, always available whenever they needed something. And the truth is, for a long time, that's exactly what I was. I let them take advantage of me. But at some point, it has to stop. Because if you keep allowing it, they will never stop. They will take every cent, every favor, every piece of your sanity, and they will convince themselves that it's normal, that it's your duty. And you need to have the courage to say no. I know it's not easy. Saying no to manipulative parents is like pulling an emotional rug out from under them, the same rug they spent years weaving beneath your feet. And trust me, they will try to make you feel guilty. They will call you ungrateful. They will remind you of everything they ever did for you, as if raising a child is some kind of lifelong contract where you owe them repayment forever. But you don't owe anyone anything just for being born. Real parents raise their children to be independent, not to become puppets. Real parents understand that when a child grows up, they become an adult, and being an adult means you have the right to make your own decisions. That's what I learned, the hardest way possible. I had to watch my parents drown in debt because they thought they could control their children's money. I had to listen to Eleanor blame me for her own failures because she could never take responsibility for her own choices. I had to cut them off because it was the only way to finally be free. And today, I can say with absolute certainty, it was the best decision of my life. I have no regrets. I feel no guilt. I don't miss them. If there's one thing I wish everyone understood, it's this. Parents are not gods. They do not have an automatic right to what belongs to you. They do not have the right to control you. If you don't learn to protect yourself, they will drain you of everything you have. And one day, when you have nothing left, do you know what will happen? Nothing. They won't help you. They won't repay what you gave them. They will just find someone else to drain. That's what I learned, and that's why today I am free. Because I took control of my life. And if there's one thing I can tell you, it's this. Do the same, before it's too late. It had been years since I last thought about them. My life had moved on, and with each passing day without hearing their voices, without feeling the suffocating pressure of forced obligation, I could breathe a little easier. It was as if I had finally learned to exist without carrying the weight of being someone else's endless source of resources. I was happy. For the first time in a long time, my life was mine. I made my own decisions, worked for what was mine, and spent my money however I pleased, without worrying about someone trying to dip their hands into my pockets. I owed nothing to anyone, and that was the best feeling in the world. But as always, certain things have a way of coming back to haunt you. I was at a distant cousin's house, one of those relatives who never got involved in anything and whom I still spoke to occasionally. The conversation was flowing casually until he suddenly dropped something, completely unaware of the weight of his words. You know how your parents are, right? They talk about you to everyone. I frowned, confused. Talk about me how? He shrugged casually, grabbing another bite of food, like this was just small talk. Like, that you abandoned them, that you left them with nothing, humiliated your own family, that you got rich and don't even look their way. Stuff like that. I laughed. Not out of nervousness, not out of shock. I laughed because it was so predictable. It felt like a joke. And do you believe that? He raised his hands in a defensive gesture. Of course not. But a lot of people do. I took a deep breath. Should I care? Maybe. But I didn't. If there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's that no one wants to hear the truth when the lie is more convenient. They had already picked a side. They had already decided I was the villain in the story. I could explain everything. I could show bank statements, messages, voice recordings, proof of how I was drained dry, how I was treated like a walking ATM. But for what? People like that don't care about the truth. They want a story that makes them feel superior. They want a villain to point at and say, look how cruel he was. Because if they admitted that I was right, that would mean admitting that my parents were the real problem. And no one wants to deal with that. Well, if they'd rather believe that, that's their problem, I shrugged, taking a sip of my drink. My cousin chuckled. You really don't care, do you? And why would I? Because at the end of the day, I was right. I am not financially responsible for anyone. I am not an open wallet. And if there's one thing I did that I'm most proud of, it's refusing to let myself be treated as a never-ending source of money. They could hate me. They could call me a monster. They could twist the story however they wanted to make themselves look like victims. None of that would change the fact that no one has the right to demand someone else's money. They wanted to live at my expense. They wanted me to keep paying for their bad decisions. But I didn't need them anymore. And that was the real reason they hated me. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the apartment, the car, or the lifestyle I built for myself. It was because they lost control over me. Because as long as I depended on them, I was a puppet. But when I realized I could stand on my own, when I refused to keep sacrificing myself, when I put an end to their financial manipulation, I became the enemy. But I was at peace with that. Because I am not obligated to support anyone. And they could throw tantrums, cry, spread lies to whoever would listen. At the end of the day, I'm the only one who controls my money. And I would never let anyone get their hands on it again. Never. Time passed, and while Eleanor and Robert sank deeper into the mess they had created, Ben thrived. He had always been smart, but after everything that happened, he became calculating. He didn't just learn from past mistakes, he fortified himself so that no one, especially our parents, could ever take advantage of him again. The difference between us was always clear. I wanted freedom, he wanted control. I wanted to cut ties and never look back. He wanted to ensure that he would never have to rely on anyone ever again. And the way he achieved that was simple: Bitcoin. At first, I didn't fully understand his obsession with it. I worked, saved my money the traditional way, bought what I needed, and lived my life in peace. But him? He studied. He spent hours upon hours tracking charts, learning strategies, understanding the market. He knew that keeping money in traditional banks was a trap, and he wanted something that no one could ever touch, especially our parents. When he first started talking about it, I remember asking, half jokingly, okay, but what if one day you need to withdraw that money? He shrugged and answered without hesitation, I can do that whenever I want. But no one else can. No bank, no government, no greedy hands. Not even our parents. And that was exactly what happened. I didn't keep up with them much anymore, but I knew things weren't going well. The house was long gone. The tiny apartment they lived in now was a far cry from what they once had. And Eleanor? Well, she never knew how to handle failure. For her, the blame always had to be placed on someone else, and we had always been her favorite targets. Even after years, the stories about me still circulated. Now, on top of being the ungrateful son who abandoned his parents to fend for themselves, I was also the manipulator who turned my brother against them. Because in her mind, he never would have done anything on his own. He was the golden child, the protected one, the son who never said no until he did. And that was something she could never accept. The thing is, despite all the lies, they still had hope in him. Deep down, Eleanor believed that one day Ben would come back, that if she played her cards right, he would feel guilty and rush to help them. But she had no idea what he had become. My brother didn't exist in the system anymore. He had no bank accounts under his name. He had nothing they could use as leverage to guilt-trip him into doing his part for the family. His money was locked away in places where no one could ever touch it. I found out about this the best way possible. One day, he asked me to meet up. It wasn't unusual, but from the tone of his message, I could tell he had something serious to talk about. We met at a quiet bar, and he got straight to the point. You know our parents still try to reach me, right? I sighed. I can imagine. What is it this time? He swirled his drink in the glass, thoughtful. Same old story. They're struggling. They need help. And guess what? I'm the only son who can still save them. I rolled my eyes. Of course. They still think you have a regular bank account, don't they? He smirked. Exactly. And that's when things got interesting. How so? He pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot of an email. It was from Robert. Son, I know we've had our differences, but we're going through a really difficult time. Your mother is desperate. I'm doing what I can, but we can't keep up with the bills anymore. I know you have the means to help us, and deep down, I know you still care. You know we're not perfect, but we're your family. Please help us with anything you can. I raised an eyebrow. Did you reply? He grinned in that way I knew all too well. Yeah. For a brief moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. What did you say? He turned the phone toward me. Dad, I understand the situation, but I haven't used banks in years. All my money is in cryptocurrency, and unfortunately, there's no way for me to transfer anything to you. I hope you find a solution. Best of luck. I burst out laughing. You basically told them that even if you wanted to help, you physically couldn't. He took a sip of his drink, satisfied. Exactly. And you know the best part? They believed it. And that was it. The game was over. For the first time in their lives, they were completely powerless. They could scream, they could cry, they could tell anyone who would listen how ungrateful we were, but none of that changed the reality. There was no longer a single cent they could take from us. Because Ben had no money in banks. Because Ben no longer existed in the traditional system. And they couldn't do a damn thing about it. Over the next few days, he got more messages. First, Eleanor tried the emotional approach. Then, when she saw it wasn't working, she moved on to threats. You're going to regret leaving us like this. When you need us, we won't be there. You were never a real son. I read through them and could only laugh at how pathetic she sounded. She never realized that we had made peace with this reality a long time ago. And now? Now they were alone. Robert remained silent. He had never been the one to make decisions, never the one to stand up to anything. He had always just followed the tide, always lived in Eleanor's shadow. If he once believed that Ben could be their backup plan, now he understood that there was no hope left. And Eleanor? Well, the last thing we heard was that they were trying to sell whatever they had left. Maybe they'll figure something out, maybe they won't. But you know what I find funniest about all of this? If there was one thing Eleanor hated more than anything in life, it was losing control. And now she had nothing left. No money, no power, no influence over us. Ben went on with his life, never having to worry about anyone touching what was his. And me? I finally got the confirmation of what I had known all along. We won. And they would never be able to touch us again.